Good evening, citizens, council, and staff. I call the City Council meeting of January 17th, 2017 to order. Clerk Hefner, can you call the roll?
Mayor Griffin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ruthven.
Here.
Councilmember Sinetti.
Present.
Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Hoppe.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez.
Tonight we have Scout Troop 456 here, and they're going to lead us in the pledge. If you all would like to take your place up on the top here, and your leader will tell us when we're ready to get started.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Scouts. We have an agenda that has been posted and presented to City Council. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? And I'd like to talk about the agenda for just a moment. We're varying from the way we might have done it in the past in one space tonight. What we are going to be doing over the next month or so is talking about how to improve the agenda to make it flow better, and we have to do that through incorporating it into our legislative rules or our protocols, and we have to agree on it as a council, so it has to come to us. And we will be doing that hopefully in February. In the meantime, one of the issues that has been a little bit difficult to work with is the consent agenda items are normally those items for which there is little discussion. They would generally be voted on. There's not too much about them that's controversial. However, a council member can pull those, and then at that time, when they're pulled, we have a discussion until eventually a motion is made and they're voted or up or down into the consent agenda item list, which was approved as a list with those exceptions. It's kind of awkward because tonight we have one item that we know for sure is going to have discussion. So as we're moving toward this next agenda that we're working toward, you'll see that there is an item that is in our general business and would have normally been in the consent agenda because it's an item on first reading, but it's a pretty complex item, so we're putting it in general business with the knowledge that we're going to have to have a discussion with the city manager to be able to understand what this is all about. So that's a little change on the agenda for those folks who keep track of those things real closely. So for public comment tonight, we have public comment at this time, and we try to orient it to the items that are on the consent agenda, or as I said, the one that I was just talking about, the one that's in general business. We do that so that we can be sure as a council to hear if there are concerns about items before we bring them up for a vote. So this is the first opportunity for anyone to express opinions or ask questions that are not part of the hearings. There are two opportunities. This one, which as I said, is for discussions about the consent agenda and general business items. And then later in the meeting, if you have general issues you'd like to make council aware of, we have an opportunity there to do them. An immediate response should not be expected. Anyone who would like to speak during either public comment session, please sign in on the green comment card, which is being brought to me down to me by the clerk now. We expect the comments to be civil, and we expect that there's no disrespectful behavior. We do a 3-minute time limit, and I do not see anybody who has signed up on the first public comment, and this would be 4 items on the consent agenda, or that one item that we were talking about that we're going to discuss in some detail. That brings us to consent agenda items, which is item 5 on the agenda. And Councilmember Clark is here, and I would mention that Councilmember Valdez called me. He's unable to make it tonight, but I'm sure he's watching us on TV. Consent agenda item A is Resolution 01-2017, a resolution specifying the location where notices of public meetings are to be posted and the newspaper where notices and other information required to be published will be printed for 2017. Consent agenda item B is Resolution 02-2017, a resolution to endorse an application for funds to Arapahoe County Open Spaces Grant Program for improvements to Bowles Grove Park. Consent agenda item C is ID number 17-03. That's a motion recommending appointment of Victim Assistance Coordinator Linda Suttle to the Arapahoe County Community Corrections Board. Consent agenda item D is ID 17-16. It's a motion to reappoint Ethan Feldman as municipal court judge for a 2-year term and to provide a compensation adjustment based on his 2016 performance evaluation. Consent agenda item E is ID 17-17. That's approval of the appointment of Tiffany Hooten as finance director. Consent agenda item F is ID 17-06, certification of the December 20th, 2016 regular meeting minutes.
Pull.
The item has been pulled by Councilmember Clark. Can I get a motion for the remaining items that are on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of consent agenda items 5A through 5E.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items A through E. Any discussion? Ready to vote.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations, Tiffany.
It is now official. It is now official.
Mayor, I move to approve, based on the city clerk's certification, the December 20, 2016 video as the minutes for the December 20, 2016 regular meeting of City Council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Who seconded?
Peggy did.
Peggy, you're giving it to Peggy.
I heard
Okay.
too.
Is there any discussion? Are you ready to vote?
The vote is 5 in favor with Councilmember Clark voting no. The motion carries 5-1.
This brings us to agenda item 6, which are ordinances for second reading and public hearing, and tonight we do not have any, so there'll be no action there. This brings us to to agenda item number 7, general business. And this is the item that I mentioned that we're doing things a little bit out of sequence. This is a first reading, and it will require a motion in a second, but do we have a presentation? And we do, from the interim city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm putting on my Public Works Utilities hat here for this evening. So we do, as the mayor pointed to here, we have kind of the first reading of an ordinance, and this is probably a good example of why we are perhaps going to change the council protocols. It is perhaps a little complex, certainly has some history, and we, depending on council action here this evening, we certainly could move to the second reading and public hearing, which is set here tentatively for February 7th. So my intent here is to go through kind of a brief history and background of this issue. If council does have some questions, we can either ask them this evening. If you have some between now and the second reading, certainly you could email those, and I could certainly work with the other districts to perhaps respond. Yes.
Quick
Mayor Pro
question.
Tem.
Part of our discussion included having these types of issues actually start with a study session
Yes.
and then move in. Is there a time sensitivity with this one where that didn't happen?
Well, I think this has been worked on ever since I've been here, quite honestly. And so I think that we finally reached resolution here with the Army Corps of Engineers here, probably late this fall. And so I think it was the intent of the two districts to try to move this thing forward sooner rather than later. And so I just think it's just a matter of timing, the way this thing played out here for the agenda.
And then we will meet on February 7th as a council to pass that resolution and modify our protocols and all. And then we'd have the opportunity to begin to set up this different process. So it would be quite a delay, really.
And I suppose certainly if the council so wishes, if you would rather poll this and have a study session on it, I'm sure we certainly could do that. I'm sure the two districts might be disappointed by further time, but I understand the complexities of this issue, and you probably would benefit from more of a study session discussion. So I can appreciate that.
Since we have a short agenda, we can just.
No, I'm not suggesting that we move it to a study session. My question was there a reason that we didn't? Was there a time sensitivity on this? If there's not a time sensitivity, that's fine. That's the answer, and we can continue. That wasn't my intention.
That's fair.
And just one more comment on that.
Yes.
When we're putting together the calendar for future events, the city manager is going to modify that calendar so that it's going to always have a boilerplate at the very first item in a study session, the possibility of studying these more complex issues. So we're going to try to, assuming we all vote to do that, try to get that in place.
In fact, you'll see that format here this next Thursday. And again, it might be a little presumptuous on my part since the council won't formally act on this protocol, but staff needed some time to kind of work this into our own internal processes to kind of reflect that direction. I'm assuming, obviously, that the council will want to approve that action. Okay. Oops. So let me, again, the council consideration here for this evening is really accepting the transfer of the ownership of this gravity portion here to the city. And by doing so, you'd be executing an agreement, accepting a series of easements and licenses, and voiding other easements here that no longer are applicable. I put this larger graphic together here to kind of orient here the council. And if I can get the cursor to work. Do it this way. Maybe not. So there's two circles here, and the lower portion here you can see is circled green, and this is adjacent to Chatfield here, and this will obviously stay with the Roxborough Water and Sanitation District. It's the portion circled in red here is kind of the focus of the staff communication here. And I want to kind of point out here for future reference in a couple of slides here, kind of the point in between the green and the red here, because that's where the Army Corps of Engineers, we had some issues there with the ownership issue. And so here this evening, thank you, Wendy. Okay, so a little bit of background on this. It does have some history here. So Roxborough Water and Sanitation District in 2005 constructs this gravity line, and they connect to what I will point to a little later here as kind of the shared line. And when Roxborough kind of proceeded with this thing, they actually oversized this particular line. And so part of the packet here, you see there's an exhibit that tries to show you a little more specifically what we're referencing here. So this, again, is kind of that area that was previously circled here. And so if council, if you, again, I'm going to reference the lower portion here because I'm going to come back here, but this is where the Army Corps was having some conflicts with the indemnification and ownership issue. So Roxborough builds this gravity system. They oversize it to a point roughly in here where I put a little hatch right here. And it's this point here north all the way towards Bellevue is kind of the shared piece. So again, the gravity section oversized to roughly this point here. And then we have the Platte Canyon Water and Sand District that kind of owned and maintained this shared system. In this particular shared system there, it actually served Platte Canyon, obviously Roxborough, and the city. And per a 2006 agreement, improvements were made because Platte Canyon at one level here was having some issues here trying to maintain this thing. And part of the work that they accomplished, both the city and Platte Canyon came into here, and I'm referencing another map, into a lift station. And so when this thing was reconstructed here, they actually eliminated this lift station and created this gravity system all the way here towards Bellevue. And so these were part of a 2006 agreement where the two districts here would make these changes here, and then the city would not pay for that particular cost, but there would be an understanding that the city would eventually take ownership after these improvements, and the debt was cleared from these improvements. So then, after this 2006 agreement and all these improvements were constructed, then the city here started to work through the ownership transfer here. And again, I want to reference here, this is kind of a different exhibit that was in the packet here, and it's this area adjacent to C470 where originally the concept of this entire gravity system was with the rest of the system being transferred to the city. But there's a section in here that actually was Army Corps of Engineers property, again, this very lower part of the graphic. And that's where we've been kind of hung up with the Army Corps here for the last several months, perhaps even close to a year, and trying to iron out that issue. In the end, the Army Corps wasn't willing to relinquish that requirement, and so Roxborough is actually going to maintain that ownership on the Army Corps property. And so once you leave the Army Corps property, then the city, according to this proposed agreement, would take ownership of that all the way here towards Bellevue. You know, so from the city's perspective, again, per the 26 agreement, there really is no cost to the city for this transfer. All of that work and improvements were done here by the districts. The intent of this would, from the city perspective, would allow future city connections to the system with, quite honestly, without any other parties subject to that. We would own it, we would be responsible. The staff report does talk a little bit about the maintenance of the issue, both now and certainly in 2006. Because the system is new, there's really no immediate cost in what we as Public Works would see as kind of the maintenance of the issue. However, as you look at the very long-term ownership and maintenance of this particular system, there would be an expense here that we would have to account for eventually in relining the nature of an interceptor with the creation of hydrogen sulfides and the like, tends to be very corrosive. And so there would be an expectation that a system like this would require, some heavy maintenance in, 20, 30 plus years from now. Obviously, if we take ownership of this, we're going to have to manage the sewer smells. And I think the council's aware that we've had some complaints in this particular area here, whether it's part of this system or others. An interceptor tends to be a little bit more of a challenge when it comes to these issues. We certainly can manage that when the staff is prepared. We deal with that currently in other parts of our own system. But I think we just need to acknowledge the fact that if we take the system, that responsibility obviously would fall upon us. Again, that's just a very brief presentation on the issue. Obviously, this particular staff communication is laden with some pretty heavy exhibits. All of the easements and license transfers need to be a part of the record. And that's part of the reason here for kind of this heavy particular item. So again, if council's got any particular questions, I'd be certainly willing to try to answer them. If I don't know, I certainly will tell you that, and we'll work with existing staff and the districts here to try to respond in time for the second hearing.
Mayor Pro Tem.
A couple quick questions. Based on the location of it, do we have any, and I would say within the next 5 years, have we identified any need that we may have to connect?
I do not have the answer to that, but I certainly could work with our own staff to see if we can make a projection of what we might expect, say, 5 to 10 year horizon.
Partly because where it's located is really through South Platte Park.
Yes.
So, do you happen to know if we connected to that when we redid the Reynolds Landing restrooms?
I do not know, but I can certainly verify that as well.
Okay. Because I think there's also a connector there, so we may have I don't know. And I'm getting into something I don't know anything about, so. Do you have any idea what the maintenance cost would be going forward?
The staff communication back in 2006 does not have that detail, and I certainly could work with our own staff here now to try to estimate what that very long-term view might be, but it is not reflected in the documents we currently have.
If there's consensus on council, I'd love to see some, like a 50-year projection on that, based on what we know about our own sewer lines. And is this the same line that was relined a few years back, that they went in and did the relining on?
Not the city work. No, I'm not.
No, it was the Roxborough line that went through South Platte Park, I think, because I recall that there was a relining of the pipe through there. It was quite a mess, and it went through the park and along the trail, along the Mary Carter, went through Reynolds Landing and down. So I'd like to know if that, it was my understanding it was the Roxborough line. I just would like that confirmed.
I can verify that, certainly.
Okay. And then also back to the cost, and you had indicated that, we may be looking at maintenance cost 20 to 30 years down the road. I'd like some sort of a timeline of, and it doesn't have to be for that line, but a line that age, what can be expected? What's kind of worst case expectation, and then what maybe?
Be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Ralph in this instance. Since the city did not do the construction on this, and we've had odor issues along this particular gravity line, what kind of engineering analysis has been done in this potential acquisition that indicates we're satisfied with the gravity component of this, as at times some of the odor issues were indicated that the flow wasn't fast enough through, and that there was essentially odorific remnants at certain points of the pipe?
I certainly could work with our staff and the two districts to try to answer that question. Right offhand, I do not know.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Oh, no, it's okay.
No.
Go ahead. Did the council actually pass the intergovernmental agreement in 2006?
My understanding is that is correct, but I can certainly verify that.
Okay. And the agreement calls for us to take ownership?
It infers that, yes.
It infers that, but it doesn't specifically say that?
I can verify the language, but as I read the document, and certainly as staff has communicated to me, it certainly intends for us to do that. But I can verify the language of 2006 for you.
Okay. Because if the council of 2006 passed that resolution proving the intergovernmental agreement, and that's the language in there, then we're really just debating, I'm not sure what.
I think, in my view, what you're debating, I suppose, is just kind of the verification of the easement transfers, the licenses, kind of the technical data behind the transfer. And certainly the ownership here has changed a little bit since 2006 due to the Army Corps of Engineers issue. So, yes, assuming that 2006, the council certainly approved all that, then I would agree that, the step that we're taking here is probably secondary to what was acted on in 2006.
Mayor, members of council, just to get a little bit more detail on Councilmember Clark's question, one of the exhibits, Exhibit D to the materials, is that October 27, 2006 IGA. It's between the city, Colorado Sewer Utility Enterprise, Platte Canyon Water and Sand District, and the Roxborough Water and Sand District. The city did agree in a number of sections to acquire ownership and take over maintenance responsibilities at that time. I think when Mark says it was inferred, there's a little bit of wiggle room there because it says in the assignment language, notwithstanding everything that we've just said, the parties acknowledge and consent that the conveyance of the shared pipe together with all maintenance and operations from Roxborough to the city upon terms and conditions as may be mutually agreed upon by Roxborough and the city and consented to by Platte Canyon, which implies that there's going to be some discussion of what those terms and conditions are. And later on, in later paragraph 29, the parties acknowledge and agree that in consideration of the payment of the city's costs associated with this agreement, as described in a different paragraph, the city agrees to accept ownership of the infrastructure. I won't read it word for word, but there's that kind of language in that 2006 IGA.
So it sounds like we agree to accept ownership, but there may be some negotiations on the conditions of accepting the ownership.
Again, just as an example, based upon what we've heard tonight, I would think that if we look into Councilmember Cernanic's issue that he raised and we determine that this thing is not flowing the way it's supposed to be flowing, I think that would be reasonable grounds to say we're not quite ready to do this yet, and there's a couple of things that have to be fixed before we will. But eventually, I would say yes, the anticipation is we are going to acquire ownership of that. That is what the IGA obligated us to do.
And Roxborough is the one that actually paid if I remember right, paid our portion of the costs for
I think that's the way it worked.
Again, I can confirm with them the specifics of it. My understanding is they paid for at least the oversizing.
Okay. All right.
Councilmember Hopping.
Director Ralph. In Exhibit A, a letter from the Water Resources Authority to the Roxborough District, it says, given the benefit of the estimated operations and maintenance cost savings to the district, the authority hereby approves the conveyance of this component of the project to the city of Littleton. Who absorbs the cost that the district saves? And what is that cost been identified?
Whatever savings has occurred as a result of the construction, the district is going to benefit from that. And so I guess I think this is a release here so that the transfer could occur because there was debt on this particular piece of infrastructure. So again, the districts will probably benefit from that, certainly with some of the work they did. However, in the end, the city is going to accept all ownership of this thing and benefit, I suppose, from the improvements that were made. And an example, to me, an obvious one is the elimination of a lift station. That's an obvious benefit. But you know, this piece here is specifically targeted towards Roxborough. I could certainly work with them to provide a little more detailed explanation of that.
That'd be good.
I have another question.
Additional question, Councilmember Cernanik.
Yes, just going back to the IGA from 2006 that the city attorney referred to, there is a difference between this proposed IGA as far as cost sharing of maintenance going forward. If you go to paragraph 9 within the 2006 agreement, it says, at such time the city becomes the owner of the shared pipe, the city shall perform all routine and emergency maintenance on the shared pipe, with the costs of such routine and or emergency maintenance being allocated among the parties in the percentages established in paragraph 5.4 above. And so I'm not sure if the shared pipe only refers to a segment or such, but the 2006 agreement does not imply that the city would take on the cost of that maintenance going forward.
We can certainly verify that. If you remember in some of the graphics, the shared pipe is the very northern section of this thing, basically from that lift station north, but I'll verify that. Be happy to.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And I don't even know if this is feasible, but what would be the value to the city if we take this on, is it considered an asset? It's infrastructure.
Correct.
So is there a equated value to that? If you don't know now, that we'd get something back on that?
Well, certainly as a piece of infrastructure, our finance director left, but, as part of GASB, certainly there'd be a valuation that we would be required to report for this particular asset. If the question is beyond the physical value of the infrastructure about what that might mean, that's perhaps a different question.
No, it was the first.
Okay, great. We can certainly answer that one.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Councilmember Cole.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm totally reading that paragraph 9. Have we been sharing the cost of any maintenance with them?
No, we don't own it. So we have not been, maybe the shared portion, there may be some other equation I'm not aware of, but certainly south of that connection here through Roxborough, we have not. That has been their ownership.
Well,
But we do share costs with Platte Canyon Water and Sanitation, don't we?
We tend to, yes. And again, I don't know the specifics, but I'd certainly be able to research that here on this particular segment here.
it says here, unless I'm seeing something in section 9, for so long as Roxborough remains the owner of the shared pipe, Roxborough shall perform all routine and emergency maintenance on the shared pipe with the cost of such routine and/or emergency maintenance being allocated among the parties in percentages listed in a particular section here. So it would sound to me like if something has been done, there was some kind of cost the city shared.
Again, going back to the 2005-2006 timeframe, there was work on the shared system for which Platte Canyon was part of that work, Roxborough as well, and improvements were made basically to eliminate the lift station, for which we did not participate in any cost for that physical improvement. If there are costs that occurred after that were perhaps, maybe more routine, certainly we could research that and see what has been accomplished over that period of time.
Okay.
Mark, it does in what Peggy's up to paragraph 5.4, it does state that the city shall be responsible for payment to Roxborough of 7.4% of the shared pipe construction cost.
If I could jump in here, Mayor and Council, I think it's a little confusing if you don't go back and look at the recitals. The recitals talk about Roxborough's constructing a pipeline. So the whole thing, we're calling it the pipeline. Then they're saying of that, there's going to be a particular portion of it north of C-470, east of South Platte Canyon Road, to the tie-in of the existing City of Littleton 54-inch sanitary interceptor. That's what this document refers to as the gravity flow pipe. Then there's going to be a portion of the gravity flow pipe, which we refer to in the IGA as the shared pipe, and that smaller piece, this note, has the capacity for handling wastewater flow of Roxborough, of Platte Canyon, and of the city. So again, not being one that has been involved in this in the past and knowing exactly if it happened the way that the IGA says it was supposed to happen, but for that small piece that this document refers to as the shared pipe for maintenance that was done prior to transfer of ownership, there was a split, or should be a split, in the cost based on the percentage of capacity that each of the three entities was gaining from their use of that shared pipe. And the document also calls for post-city acquisition of ownership. Just for that piece, there would also be a shared cost of maintenance for those costs of the shared pipe piece going forward. Does that make sense to you, Mark, being more involved in some of these recent discussions?
If I may, Council. I think based on the levels of questions, I think we may come back to the original point that perhaps was made. We'd be more than happy to bring this back to a study session and have the special districts there with us to kind of answer some of these questions. And certainly you've given us some insight here right now about some of the contract language you'd like investigator, cost, maintenance issues. So if that's your pleasure, great. Be more than happy to work with the districts to arrange that. Or if you're comfortable enough, we certainly could proceed here with the second reading.
So let me get a reading from council if I could.
I'd like us to bring it back to a study session, just so we vet this without any kind of stress. And we, I think, did this within the last year or so. We put something on a study session before we brought it back for second reading. And I think, just so there's not a pressure, it's not like this has to get done next week, I think.
Study session.
I guess I land that if this is contractually an obligation that we need to assume, then I'm not sure that a study session matters. I think that if you could answer some of our kind of practical questions about ongoing maintenance, et cetera, of it, which is really what would be our obligation, if those can be answered before second reading or at second reading, I'd be happy with that. I don't, unless it is something that we have a debate or discussion about whether or not we have any obligation to take ownership, then that would be a study session. But otherwise, I think I'm happy with it going straight to second.
Councilmember Clark.
I guess I would rather know more about this before we go forward and approve it. If the difference between, if what we're talking about maintenance is basically the videotaping and the washing and things like this that's described here, that's not very significant. If it's the excavation and the replacement, and there's one section here and I can't figure out whether it's pre or post, assuming that it says that if there's excavation involved, then there's a bid and it's split between the three. So one way this isn't all that big a deal, another way this is a pretty big deal. I think Larry's here, so if he wants to have a concern about us bringing it to study session about that delay, then perhaps we should hear from him. But absent that, I would prefer to bring it back for a study session.
Okay.
I'm okay with setting a date for second reading that's far enough out that we can get it on a study session.
We do have the district manager for Roxborough, Larry Moore, here, in case kind of the reference here. He's in the audience.
Well, let me go on down with the idea of how much more study we would like. Bill?
I'd like to see it come back in a study session because I just feel like there are some questions about the long-term maintenance. We don't know what we're getting into on that, what the cost would be, what the cost savings are that have to be absorbed elsewhere and all. I have no doubt that we'll consummate this at some point. I'd just like to know more facts before we go forward.
Bill?
Yeah, and likewise, the element is, do we have a sub-district here that possibility on different rates? We've had some issues with rate differentials that the city has undertaken, and what are the options on that, even though it may be a longer term and out in the future, knowing that the property is in the city, the access to it is much easier and can be to our satisfaction. I know that the path that was taken through South Platte and the revegetation of that was of concern, and so I think having that kind of discussion would be good. Although if council wanted to proceed and put a date out there, either way, but I think either it gets addressed when we get to the second reading, and then the question is, do we proceed or do we handle it through a study session in the interim?
So what I'm going to suggest is we had the motion that was prepared for tonight was to move it to second reading on February 7th. We could just, when we make that motion, make it February 21st. Between then and now, we have a study session opportunity And the study session opportunity that seems to fit might be the one for 14th of February. So, no, we don't need to have that in the motion. We have just have the motion for the second reading, and we know that we're going to calendar the study session on the 14th.
Can we fit it in the 14th?
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar. It looks like we'd be good.
Okay.
The Geneva Village update, that's
Yeah,
the
that-
only thing on there.
If that's the only item,
That's the only
this
item.
would certainly fit.
Okay, I think that's where we're going to go in a moment with a motion, but the question about having the director from Roxborough here today, in the audience, that's not real fair. You didn't get a chance to prepare. But if there's a simple answer you have for something that might help us, it's your option. I'm not asking you to step down unless you feel interested. Okay, thanks. We're all working together on these things anyway, so we feel comfortable with doing
Absolutely.
it.
Good evening, Council. Larry Moore, General Manager, Roxborough Water and Sanitation District. You want the address? 6222 North Roxborough Park Road. Those are all good questions, and we have answers to those. I think they're, and I guess based on what I've heard here tonight, I think a study session would be good because I think we can handle most of those questions, even to the point of Councilman Clark's question, whether it's pre or post, and so I think we can get all those cleared up. We had odor issues early on. We spent $1 million fixing that. I think if you'll remember, we haven't had any real odor issues in the most recent years, and so I think the pipe works real well. Reason you've never gotten a bill is because we had virtually little to no maintenance. It wasn't enough to even go to the trouble to divide the money up. It works very well, and once again, we did able to help eliminate that lift station, which anytime you can get rid of one of those, you're way ahead. So I think it's back when '06 when we made the deal, it was a good deal. It was a good deal then, and I think it's a good deal now. And I think we can get you comfortable with all your questions, and so spend some time on the 14th would be welcome.
Does the 14th work for you?
Yes, yeah, we'll make it work.
Great.
In that case, I move to approve the or is that too early?
I'm ready.
Okay. Move to approve the ordinance on first reading authorizing the interceptor transfer agreement between the City of Littleton and Roxborough Water and Sanitation District, terminating 2 easements by the City of Littleton in Southwest Park and north of West Bowles Avenue, and granting an access easement to Roxborough Water and Sanitation District by the City of Littleton, and schedule a public hearing for February 21st, 2017.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
Just a footnote to that, to make sure that we also calendar on February 14th at the study session discussion with questions being answered. Thank you.
Ready to vote?
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
This brings us to agenda item 8. This is the second opportunity for public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone to express any opinions about questions that were not part of those previously addressed in tonight's hearings. An immediate response should not be expected. Anyone who would like to speak during either public comment, please sign up on that green sheet. I'm getting the second green sheet here in a moment. Again, we expect comments to be civil. We do not want any disrespectful behavior, and there's a 3-minute time limit. Don Bruns. Good evening.
Thank you.
Can you zoom it?
Good evening, Council. Don Bruns, District 4. Someone once said that one of the most discourteous things anyone can do, having been well served, is to fail to express grateful appreciation. My opportunity to do that was in a letter of thanks sent to Historic Preservation Board Chairperson Pamela Grove for her great leadership in consolidating board member concerns expressed at HPB's December 19th meeting. This was one of the best team clarity, some of the best team clarity and responsiveness to citizens that I have seen in these chambers. Board members prepared to send the LAI Design Group's COA application for 2679 West Main Street back to staff for revised plans and renderings that fit the project site. Assimilating extensive board member dialogue, Chairperson Grove carefully worded a motion describing specific reasons why the proposed structure did not conform to the surrounding character of Littleton's historic Main Street. Quote, I so move that staff work with the applicant of the Littleton mixed-use building at 2679 West Main Street to provide revised plans and renderings that take into account the size of the stories to be more compatible with downtown Littleton buildings, the height of the buildings, the scale, the mass, the style, the proportion to adjacent buildings, and keep in mind that the courthouse and the mill are supposed to be the dominant and tallest buildings in downtown Littleton. Also to consider step back and to provide renderings at a study session and plans on January 18th, including views from Santa Fe and Main Street for further discussion. Then she asked for her fellow board members, will that work? But the city's presiding staff attorney interjected, quote, we just recommend having a motion to continue and then all instructions to staff can be outside the motion. So please withdraw the motion. Chairperson Grove withdrew her motion, but the staff attorney's action clearly overstepped board prerogatives. It prevented the forwarding of specific reasons why the proposal failed. Absent its collective determination, HPB now had to trust that staff working with the applicant would come up with a revised qualifying application. Why did the staff attorney intrude? Was it to keep the applicant from having to address these particulars in the first place, or was it so that whoever on city staff could get what they wanted anyway? HPB's packet for tomorrow's meeting now reveals that staff and the applicant did not address HPB's findings, but only reworked the edges of the design, something several board members had already observed would not be sufficient. Now what? Council could direct that staff details outlined in the withdrawn HPB motion still end up as specific directions to staff. The proponent might not yet comply, but wouldn't that help counter the distrust the staff attorney created? After all, who's running whom? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don. I don't have anyone else who has signed up this evening. Is there somebody who would like to speak who missed the opportunity? Pam?
Can we ask if you're going to speak from now on, Pam? Could you please sign up on the sheet? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't intend to necessarily, so I will. I usually do, Wendy. I'm quite sure about that. Could I also have the projector as well? For council members Cernanek and Hopping who were not here last time, I wanted to go back to December 6th. I was very concerned about comments that were made from the dais relating to B2 districts, urban renewal, and how we influence development in those areas. And I was concerned that by a number of things, just private-public partnerships. We don't normalize public-private partnerships. They're not, in general, good for cities. They get a short-term profit for the private party, and then the city carries a long-term burden. You're putting a burden on future councils. I, as a citizen, am concerned about that. Let's not normalize it. But there was a reference to use by right in B2 as if the Grove established a precedent for B2 use by right. And that is false. And I need to explain to you why I believe that. And let me first say that It is unlawful, according to our code, for any person to violate the provisions of Title 10, our zoning regulations. It is unlawful. So at issue in the Advocates for Littleton case are 2 paragraphs, and one of them is for the approval of a site development plan, which is kind of on the upper right. And the question is, it simply says the decision of city staff on the SDP shall be final unless the applicant files a written appeal. But the advocates said that 231 says the Board of Adjustment, hereinafter referred to as the board, shall have the power to hear and decide appeals relating to Title 10 of this code. So advocates wanted access to the Board of Adjustment through that paragraph. The only thing that was decided by the district court so far is he said that the SDP basically trumped the second one. I'm not sure that's correct, but that's all that was decided. The merits of the Grove case, the actions of staff in approving that SDP, and the specific decisions they made have never been adjudicated or looked at by any level of government, not the Board of Adjustment, not the Arapahoe District Court, nobody so far. So just to kind of go over this, because many citizens brought to council in August, September, October of 2015 are concerns about the proposal. For one thing, there's an R3 parcel being used in the Grove. It's residential and it may not be used for this development. It's also marked not a part. The city has no obligation to approve something that uses a parcel that's not a part of the proposal. Another issue is B2 and residential, whether residential parking spots are residential use.
Pam, your time is up.
So let me just say it's not decided, and I would like to not hear that from the dais. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pam. I don't see anybody else who is interested in speaking. At this point, that brings us to agenda item 9, which is the opportunity for comments and reports. Mark?
Mr. Mayor, I do not have any reports here, but I think the city attorney has a response here I'd like to share with council.
Is that okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
Yep. I know that public comment is an opportunity to listen to the public and not debate the public, but, you know, given the allegations that have been made against a member of my staff, and I know that this is the second time now because you all received a letter about some other allegations that we're in the process of responding to. I just wanted to set the record straight. And let me preface this by saying I've watched that tape twice, both times focused on the earlier letter that you received so that we can respond to that. So I'm not sure if what I'm about to say is completely accurate, but my recollection is that there was a motion to continue and then a subsequent, this chair's motion was subsequent to that. And I think when Brandon said we just recommended having a motion to continue, was meaning the board, that you already have that motion and that it's not appropriate to do this second one. But rest assured, and I want our speaker to be assured, even if I'm not accurate on that point, the issues that were of concern to the Preservation Board, they didn't deny this. They said, we're not ready to vote on it. We need more information. And we hope the developer will meet with our staff and address the concerns that, as our speaker mentioned, were pretty well articulated by the Historic Preservation Board. As you all know better than most, you can't force a developer to do that. It is true that in the packet, it's clear that there was not a lot of extensive discussion and movement by the developer. That's not because the staff didn't make an effort to do that. So this whole idea about the staff having some hidden motive to try to keep having a motion from having some language in it that would have directed staff to work with the developer on changing something, that none of that happened. Nobody on staff has a hidden motive. The developer will propose what the developer wants to propose. And there were discussions from the developer at that meeting that night that you can't make me do this. I will sue the city if you turn me down. Well, maybe they will. That's their prerogative. Our role is to advise the staff, and if the developer doesn't like the decision tomorrow night and they appeal to the city council, advise the city council as to how you work through the process and what kind of decisions you can make that are consistent with the legal obligations of the city. So the staff has tried to talk to the developer. There's nothing, in my opinion, that was inappropriate about the process. Like I said, you'll be receiving a separate memo, but I know there was also a concern that the city attorney, Brandon Dittman, who was present that night, rudely interrupted the public. And as you know, sometimes in a meeting, you hear members of the public making comments while the council is deliberating, or when staff is presenting, or maybe not making verbal comments, but making verbal gestures or wildly shaking their heads. You can actually see that on the tape of the meeting. And he asked the audience to please show respect for the board's deliberations, exactly as I would have done, or actually Wendy's the one who usually jumps in and does that here and keeps people on track for the 3 minutes if the presiding person in the meeting does not keep track of the clock. Now, all of you who have served as mayors and our existing mayor are usually pretty darn good with that. The chairs of our boards and commissions aren't always quite so good. And in fact, staff asked Brandon before the meeting, would he please take the role of policing that issue? Jocelyn, I think, was sick that night and did not go to the meeting. She watched it, but she didn't go. She said everything that happened at that meeting was consistent with what Brandon was asked to do before the meeting. And I hope if you don't believe me or you want to verify this, you'll check with members of the HPB. But the chair and the members of the HPB came up to him after the meeting and thanked him for trying to keep order as best as he could that night because, you know, frankly, they don't usually deal with the kind of land use controversy that you are much more familiar with and therefore more experienced in dealing. So in my opinion, both from what he was asked to do by staff, what he was thanked for doing by the HPB chair and board after the meeting, he did exactly what I would have done. And I want the public to know, despite the easy way to sort of revert to what are the hidden motives of staff when something doesn't look quite right to me, that staff has no hidden motives here. They have done what the board asked them to do. They have tried to talk to the developer. This issue is going to come up tomorrow night. The board is going to get a memo outlining what their legal authority is and what a good administrative record is and what findings of fact and conclusions are and how that needs to be based upon the facts in an administrative record because of what a potential appeal might look like later on down the line. And I trust that the board will be well advised tomorrow. And if they make a decision that that anybody doesn't like and it ends up getting appealed, that the city will be as well protected as it could be. So I wanted you to have that perspective on my looking into the HPB meeting.
Thank you. Does council have any questions from the city attorney? Because we did all receive a letter and have some involvement in this. Any questions? Don't?
I don't remember the letter, so could you send it to me?
I think, well, yeah, you know what I'll do is when I send out my explanation, I'll send the letter again to everyone.
I may have gotten it.
It came to all of you, and actually the mayor sent it to me and said, what's this all about? So that's when I said, oops, I better watch that video and see what this is all about. And then I've talked to a bunch of people, so we're on it. And I will remind all of you what the letter said when we send you our explanation.
Okay, thank you. Let's go down council and see what we have for reports this evening. We'll start with Councilmember Hopping.
Just a few things in relation to the what is popularly referred to as the Valley Feed Building, we do have downtown design guidelines, but they are guidelines. I've brought up before that if we converted those to standards, they would be binding and we would not have buildings, and I'm not judging the building at Valley Feed, but we would not have buildings that aren't compatible with our existing city structures. So that's something for us to consider down the road. We had that issue with the Grove. We've got similar complaints on the Valley Feed Building, and there have been a few others. 3 business openings downtown that are really nice. Curds Cheese has opened in what was originally the Vito's structure on the north side of Main Street between Nevada and Prince, which they've got cheese, crackers, hard meats, all kinds of good stuff. So suggest you take a look in there. Also, the Alley is opened in Jose's former space, which is Mountain Mexican. So they're open for lunch and dinner. They have a dedicated food truck, and it's another welcome place to Main Street. It's really neat. They've done a great job of getting historical Littleton photos in there, and it's just really fun to walk through and lean over people's tables, and you can read the captions, and be sure not to steal hors d'oeuvres at the same time. Also, the Lost Cajun has opened down here at Prince and Santa Fe, and that's New Orleans food and red beans, rice, oysters, shrimp, anything along with that. So that's another fun place to try. So new businesses continue open in downtown Littleton and surrounding area, and it's a fun place to go. So that's what I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Cernanik.
Yes, just a quick comment to Councilmember Hopping. Maybe you could give us a dissertation on the distinction between Creole and Cajun someday. So 3 items. One is, as we looked at sales tax, retail sales tax for 2016, coming in a little bit less than budget, with our 2017 budget essentially a growth off of the 2016 budget, having some discussion with regard that, as well as what is appeared in a number of newspaper discussions has been the impact on Gallagher, and that we may want to have some of that discussion in the context of where we're heading. I don't know the date for that, but would look for a very nice date for us to possibly have a substantive discussion regarding that. Second, as I've mentioned earlier, the Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging, which was a authorization by the state legislature to deal with aging and strategy for Colorado. It's now in the hands of the legislature, and they are taking a look at that. Both Arapahoe County as well as the city of Littleton has done CASOA reports, and in conjunction with the Boomer survey, that as far as our capacity and preparedness, and given some of the turnover in the Aging Well Resource Center, it may be a little bit further out, but we probably should have some discussion of that, and would look for that as an agenda item at some point in time. And then thirdly, and probably more importantly, MetroVision 24, which the Metropolitan Area Planning Organization is Dr. Cog. The MetroVision 2040 has been a work in progress for about 3 years now. The final vote on that is scheduled for tomorrow's board meeting. If anyone is interested in reviewing it prior to that, it's available through the Dr. Cog website, but it has been reviewed by the director level on staff, as well as a number of municipalities and counties have made some comments relative to that in trying to formulate the final document, and as outlined in the document, there's an extensive involvement of partners throughout the region in development of that. What has been deferred in that, and will be a discussion this year, is the urban growth boundaries and area, which deal with density across the metropolitan region, which we probably have seen in a number of articles as to what that impact or not might be. And so just wanted to make sure council was aware of that.
Thank you, Councilmember Cole.
Just two short things. I attended both the State of the Cities conference and the Economic Forecast breakfast and found both of those insightful. Not about to be able to summarize all of that, but I always find those interesting. And then to someone who's hopefully watching from a recuperation bed, we miss Paul Bingham, who has had an issue recently. I don't need to be specific. Anybody on council wants to know, I can let you know, but we miss his presence here. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
I hope everybody had a fantastic holiday. When we met with Inglewood a few months back about the sewer, we talked about the permit and how far along in the process it was, and about getting back together once the permit was finalized. I don't know what the date is for the permit being finalized, but if it's essentially finalized, I mean, if nobody thinks that any of the parameters are going to change, then...
Councilmember Clark, if I may, I've had several discussions with Eric Keck, city manager for Inglewood, about kind of the status of the follow-up from that meeting, as well as other wastewater treatment plant staff. They are finalizing a memo that tries to capture that discussion and help us kind of forecast what we might be looking at here for the future. Specifically for the permit, you'll see as part of that memo there that from the process standpoint, and really where the state's coming from, that decision has largely probably been made. So our ability to influence the state in the final hours of this review is probably unlikely. But the memo is supposed to be touching on that, and I'll once again ask kind of the status of that for council.
Because what I was actually envisioning and hoping to have happened is once that permit stabilized enough that we were fairly confident in the parameters of the different effluent levels, that we would get some actual data from Inglewood on what their discharge amounts have been, and then look at where improvements need to be made in the process to bring the historic discharge amounts up to what the permit level is, and then so that we can understand the direction that the plant's going and what that entails for cost and things, because it was kind of nebulous, a few months back.
Understand that point, and certainly appreciate that, and we'll certainly work towards trying to answer those questions.
Okay. And then second thing is I think it would be good for us, Littleton, geez, I hate to be on the sewer all the time, but for us to have a study session and talk about rates for Littleton. And I realize that our rates are somewhat contingent on what comes out of the previous data and meeting that we talked about, but I have concerns that our tap fees are still too low. We have some potential big enterprises coming up. I think that expansion costs ought to be paid by the new users or by tap fees rather than being absorbed by the users, and it appears to me that that's what's happening still. So I think it'd behoove us to have a study session to talk about sewer rates and tap fees. And then we're going to have to tackle at some point in time, segregating the costs for the collection system out. And I know that was on the spreadsheet, although I was having a hard time following that. we may want to put that on the bill so that people can know. It depends on where the direction the council wants to go, but we've got those two components inside the city that we need to take care of. And I know you're doing a study right now, so I don't know how soon you're going to be getting results from that. But it may be worthwhile scheduling this after you get the results from that, if that's not, in geological time.
If I may just comment on that, Mr. Mayor, but I think I would agree there are some significant issues in the sewer that we need to discuss here. And I think it does start certainly with a follow-up from our discussion about the wastewater treatment plant. I do believe that we have probably some longer-term goals to try to achieve to make our utility collection system specifically more efficient, more accountable. And I do believe that eventually we need to have a discussion about kind of our rates, the structure, our cost for service, and how we might approach that so we have a clear understanding of all that. So I would welcome, if council is interested in having a discussion about the sanitary sewer at the appropriate time, if nothing else, to begin that conversation, because some of this work may obviously take quite an effort, but again, would certainly welcome that.
So the end time would be, I guess, September, whenever it is that we start doing budget discussions again. Hopefully this would happen before then, so that could be incorporated, whatever rate decisions we make.
In fact, I would, just right offhand, I would probably suggest maybe a late spring or something as probably starting that conversation.
Okay. And then I'm assuming we're going to get back together with Englewood Council, hopefully to talk about the impending improvements to the plant and the permit again.
Yes, I'm anticipating working with them to develop a work plan, related but somewhat independent of our own rate discussion. But certainly there's a lot of capital issues that we need to plan for, discuss, analyze. And so it had always been my hope, talking with the staff there, that we have this work plan schedule so that the council, really of both cities, has an opportunity to kind of weigh in at the appropriate time and not just once a year.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Kind of tagging on to what Doug said, I'm somewhat chagrined as to why it has taken upwards of 3 months for us to get kind of a report from what happened at that meeting. Kind of just the minutes of the meeting I thought would be helpful. There was a lot that was discussed, a lot that was kind of left in the air, a lot that staff said that they were going to come back with. So I don't know why it's taken so long to kind of put a collection of conversation from that day into some sort of document, but memories fade, and the longer we go, the less we're going to recall from that, and I don't want to do it again. So I don't know what pressure you can apply, or if there's something that can come from the mayor to that group. I don't know. I mean, I know it's delicate relationships, another council, we have a partnership, but I think that it's the sewer staff that we're expecting this document from. So frankly, it's way past due, my comment.
And I'll certainly relay that message. I've been assured that this report here, this memo, is eminent. And some of it, I have to admit, probably comes from the legal staff that supports the wastewater treatment plant and trying to respond to some of this. But yeah, I would agree it's time to finish this work.
That's it.
Just a couple things. On January 24th, we have a study session. The study session will involve representatives from Jaffa and some discussion of the Littleton Crossing. The city manager has reached out to any citizen that has sent in a concern through email or phone call or whatever, and has kept a list of all those who have expressed an interest and then tried to keep them up to date as we've gone along. And he has worked on trying to get the questions that the citizens have boiled down to some questions that can be provided to Jaffa for them to answer at that event. So we're looking forward to that on January 24th at the study session. And then I do want to just follow up on the Gallagher Amendment. This is the concern that's being expressed in different places You can read about it in different places. The Gallagher Amendment established a relationship between commercial and residential property taxes and established a limit as to each side of that relationship, that balance, based on certain criteria. And what has happened throughout the Denver metro area is that the number of apartments has increased the number of residences, which has changed a traditional balance that may have existed and may result in a lessening of property taxes to the various communities. Littleton is one of those communities, and our new finance director, Tiffany Hooten, very first project out of the box probably will be to report back to us on that issue with the sales tax, which she just provided to us, and then also the impacts on our projected property tax revenues because of Gallagher. So we'll be looking forward to that, and we need to set a time for that response back to council. And I know you had talked about having an opportunity for Tiffany to talk to us about those things, but I think sooner rather than later as we look at the study sessions.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, and I think I even commented in my end of the week update on this particular issue, but yes, our new finance director has been working on some of these issues here and has some preliminary calculations, Gallagher as an example. And yes, there's likely to be a negative impact here to the city regarding that calculation. And the sales tax, also commented on that. We've been working with Tiffany here, quite honestly, at the end of last week, trying to look at a schedule for what might be most appropriate here to get that on the council calendar. And quite honestly, we had some of this discussion last fall when we were putting the budget together, and council's desire to kind of stay more engaged up front with this thing early on. And so we're just looking at some dates to try to give Tiffany some time here, specifically to be prepared for those meetings.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 7:47.